Many people are sure that the war in Ukraine began in 2022, but that's not entirely true. Really, the active war that affects all of Ukraine began last year. But in fact, this war has been going on for 9 years. It's taken lives of ordinary people and soldiers who bravely defend their country from Russian invaders, especially from Putin. And today I'm gonna talk, how would this war evolve if there weren't arms supplies from Europe and America? How did they affect the war? Maybe if there weren't arms supplies, Russia would have captured Ukraine and moved on to Europe, or maybe to America. And maybe thanks to arms supplies, Putin will look like this. Or maybe he looks like that, because he sends his doppelgangers to the meetings and… Okay, never mind. What's really important is… Arms supplies had a significant impact on the course of the war. First, Russia was in the lead, then Ukraine. And so, throughout the war, the swings moved from one side to another. When Russia attacked Ukraine, it had a clear advantage in the war. First, Russia had been supplying weapons to the separatists in eastern Ukraine since 2014 in order to secure their positions. And the second, Russia had a huge human resource, a population that was supposedly ready to fight. Although I wouldn't say so. Ukraine was a small and unfortunately unknown state somewhere in Europe. However, what was much stronger than weapons was a strong spirit. The Ukrainians didn't put up with Putin's regime, unlike the Russians, and immediately fought back against Putin, thus breaking the fighting spirit of the Russian army. However, fighting spirit alone won't get you far. You need weapons, a lot of weapons, which Ukraine had very little of. Ukraine has been supplied with weapons since 2014, but I'd like to talk about the new weapons that are changing the course of the war right now. I think you would be more interested to hear about it. But first, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss my new videos. Javelin, a portable anti-tank missile system manufactured by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin of the United States. It's the first third-generation anti-tank guided missile system, equipped with a shot-forget sight. The missile has a thermal homing head, so the missile system operator doesn't have to accompany and correct the flight of the missile after launch while it's approaching to the target. This was especially important in the early days of the war, because the Russians tended to stay in columns trying to enter urban areas. The Javelin operator could fire from a building or behind a tree and disappear before the Russians could fire back. The Javelin also hits the weak spot of Russian tanks, their horizontal surface, as its trajectory after launch goes upwards and then falls on the target. Perhaps deliveries of weapons from the US provoked a more rapid development of the war. After all, Russia sees the US as its main rival. But also, I want to say, Russia would have attacked Ukraine anyway. It was just a matter of time. New deliveries of javelins began after the start of a full-scale war in Ukraine. It was the javelins that gave several advantages to Ukraine, especially relevant at the beginning of the war. They are low cost and using for defense purposes. Along with the javelins, the US and other European countries began to supply Ukraine with military aid, including weapons and ammunition, anti-tank missiles, body armor, communication equipment, and other weapons. Such aid had a great impact on the course of the war. For example, the Ukrainian military was able to fight Russian tanks and armored vehicles more effectively. In addition, more modern equipment and weapons helped the Ukrainian army to improve its combat readiness, and the NATO exercises helped improve tactics and helped to learn the equipment. But in fact, NATO is still training Ukrainian soldiers. HIMARS, a 5-ton container truck that can launch 6 missiles almost simultaneously, setting its explosive warheads far behind the front line on the battlefield, and then quickly changing positions to avoid a counterattack. If the Javelin was an iconic weapon of the early phase of the war, the HIMARS is performing well now. In the later phase of the war, HIMARS has already become an internet star, a smashing force that blows up Russian depots, which clearly upsets Putin. Yeah, they made a hell of a lot of noise. However, there is an opinion that Russia has learned to shoot down HIMARS. But there is one remark: they do that to their own harm. The main thing is that HIMARS projectiles have a GPS navigator which corrects the projectile throughout the flight. If you interfere with its operation, the projectile can deviate from the course. And Russians are increasingly disabling high-precision missiles by using electronic GPS jammers. However, Ukraine still deals these jammers. And the problem is clearly overrated, because Ukraine still launch missiles, and in most cases, they hit where they should. After all, the range of missiles is from 70 to 80 kilometers, and the GPS system navigation makes missiles extremely accurate, within about 10 meters from the target. In addition, using of jammers harms the Russians themselves, because it disrupts their own communication systems, preventing them from coordinating the actions of their units. So I don't consider shooting down the HIMARS from the course something successful for the Russian army. Also, the strikes forced Russians to move their ammunition depots farther to the rear. This way, the Russian army reduced their firepower and also made it more difficult to deliver weapons from depots to front lines. Bayraktar, a Turkish-designed drone, has become one of the world's best-known unmanned aerial vehicles because of its use in the war in Ukraine. It's relatively cheap, made from off-the-shelf parts, has lethal power, and records its actions on video. It's not without its weakness: lack of speed and vulnerability to air defenses. One time, Bayraktar helped Ukraine very much. It destroyed Russian frontline positions and ammunition depots. Leopard, a tank that incorporates all four major components of effectiveness on the battlefield: the firepower of the 120mm gun, a high level of protection, maneuverability, and advanced fire control system. In particular, the Leopard 2A4 version has already been fitted with side thermal sights, a fully digital fire control system, and a new turret and armor with elements made of tungsten and titanium. According to DW, 18 tanks have already been delivered to Ukraine. Poland has handed over 4 tanks, and Ukrainian military has already started training how to use these tanks. Now, it's impossible to say how exactly the tanks will affect the course of the war. But one thing is for sure: Putin's ass is on fire. M2 Bradley, infantry fighting vehicle of the US. The main armament of the Bradley BMP is a 25mm automatic rapid-fire gun. Despite of the seemingly small caliber, this gun is able to pierce the frontal armor of BMP-1 from a distance of 1,500 meters. At the end of 2022 in the USA, there was a talk about the intention to provide the Ukrainian army with BMP's Bradley. However, in mid-February 2023, it became known that Ukraine would also receive M7 Bradley, a rather specific model designed for long-range precision targeting. When it became clear that Russia wouldn't be able to achieve its goals in the war against Ukraine, the Ukrainian authority and military command started to prepare a counterattack with a clearly stated goal: to reach the international borders of 1991. And this requires offensive armored vehicles, tanks, BMPs, APCs, and etc. Despite much support, the US aid has some restrictions and conditions. One such condition is that the US doesn't supply Ukraine with weapons that can be used to attack another country. For example, the US doesn't supply Ukraine with air defense that can be used to create a no-fly zone in the airspace over Donbass. The US provides military aid to Ukraine, but does it so cautiously so as not to provoke Russia. That is why the issue of delivery of F-16 fighters to Ukraine hasn't been resolved yet. The US believes that if it supplies F-16 fighter jets, Russia will immediately become more active. Besides, delivery of F-16 fighters is very expensive and requires money from both the US and Ukraine. Every day Ukraine deals with two things: fights Russians and proves that it's capable to win in this war. It's not easy, but we do it, and we're going to do it until the victory. If you liked the video, don't forget to give me a thumb up and subscribe to my channel. See you in the new videos. Bye!